Welcome back. This is video 2 of whatever this is. Um, okay, today I was going to go back to the very beginning of my time at Westwood. And for those of you who are just joining us, um, this is a series of videos that I'm going to make, regardless of who's watching, of a lot of history and stuff that happened in my tenure at Westwood and Lincoln Alexander. But not only that, there are very, very few people around who have the knowledge and the experience of the history of Westwood going right back to 1968. Now, I joined in 1983, but I knew an awful lot of teachers and administrators who were there from the very, very beginning. And some of the older students who were there when I came to Westwood in 1983 might remember some of these names or a couple of names, but not necessarily know why. For example, from 1983 to 1987, the music room was located at the very, very back of the school in what was a vocal room, and that vocal room and the pool were add-ons to the school. The original outdoors for the school were where the gym is, and the stairs leading up to the music room at the back. Those doors were the actual exterior doors for the school back when it was built in 1967 or 68. Um, uh, the That whole wing, that whole tech wing, was a build on that wrapped around the school from the pool all the way around to the drafting room at the very front of the school. That didn't exist in the 60s and 70s. It was some added on sometime in the 70s. The original music room was where the food services room ended up being. Um, if you look at the back of the food services room, if you took those courses, there were two rooms for storage. Those were actually sound rooms, and in the middle was a doorway that led to that alleyway, that passage, the runway we used to call it, that would lead to the stage. So, in the very early days of the school, when they were doing a Broadway show, the band would rehearse in the band room, which was the foods room, get all dressed up and everything, and then exit through the back door, up the alley, into the calf, without having to go into the hallways. Um, the reason that the band room ended up being at the back of the school was that the music teacher who came directly before me, a gentleman by the name of Karl Waldhauser, whose name will be very familiar to people who were at the school in those early days. He opened the school in 1968 or so, and he stayed there until 1983. He and the principal at the time had a falling out, and to prove a point, the principal uh, got a foods program and basically put the foods program in the music room and put the music room at the very back of the school in the vocal room, which had those three risers, which you couldn't put a stand and a chair on. Um, so that was where it was when I came to the school. And some of the really old students from 1983 to about 1987, that's where I taught. And it was a really cramped room. There was one window at the back, back left corner if you're looking at the board. And in later years, that room became the health room, and people who took health subjects would remember that room for the window at the back. Now, the Karl Waldhauser was a very interesting man. I'll get into him, into his history, at another time. But he was, to make a long story short, he was from Germany, and he was a tremendously talented musician. In fact, when he came to Canada after the 2 hours with him, and he went over some of the students, some of the good students, and some of the not so good students. He was clearly intimidated by students who weren't necessarily old school, and he was glad to get out. But I feel bad for him because he was a really nice guy. The same thing I think went with Mr. Houghton at Darcel. Mr. Houghton was another extremely gifted musician who I worked with for several years, and Houghton had so much experience. Played with Bob Marley, was a gifted guitar player. His knowledge of music it was extensive, and I don't think he also got the recognition that he deserved, because when he finally retired, I think the principal of Darcel, there was the same issue with personality clash. It's really too bad. He was a tremendously talented musician, and the students that took lessons with Mr. Houghton will definitely remember him as one of their best teachers. Um, but when I joined the school, I didn't know what to expect, and it was rather interesting that I walked in school the very first day, um, and a couple people watching this will know who I'm talking about. The head secretary of the school says, "Well, Mr. Kaplan, welcome to Westwood, and I hope you have a good year, and I hope everything works out fine." And I'm thinking, okay, thank you very much. I look forward to it. Oh, my daughter's in your class. Okay, and she plays saxophone. Okay, and she's deaf. I went, okay, and inside my head, the gears are grinding. Okay, what the deaf? Okay, I haven't taught deaf before. It's a music class. So at that time, the music room was at the very back of the school. So the time it took me to go from the main office to the back of the school, I had to come up with a plan because her class was period 1 or maybe 2. And when we came and everybody had their instruments, and I identified who this person was, and I realized that while she might be deaf, she definitely had a sense of the vibration coming through the chair. And so I kind of placed her close to the bass drum and the bass player, both of whom over the years, um, students on the spectrum, on the autistic spectrum. And the students that I've taught have been spectacular. Wonderful, wonderful students without fail. They have been tremendously talented musicians all through the ages. Okay. I've taught uh, uh, students with Down syndrome. In fact, there are a few of them, including one who ended up being quite successful as a pianist, as an actor, as a singer. He was just a wonderful, wonderful kid. And I've taught blind students, students who couldn't read the music for obvious reasons, and they figured things out. I taught students with less than 10 fingers in piano. Um, but the very, very first exposure to not taking things for granted. There's an old habit that band teachers use when you're trying to get people to stop stomping their feet on the floor when they're playing. Okay, you got this ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum thing happening, and if you're on stage and the stage happens to be wooden, it sounds like there's a bunch of soldiers marching in, and you don't want that. So band teachers, as a rule, have this little thing up their sleeve where they say, "Okay, tap your toes inside your shoes." Okay, well, guess what? I don't do that, but that's what we're supposed to tell the students. Okay, hand goes up. Grade 9 class, beginning band. Kid puts up his hand. Yes, I have no toes. I don't have feet. And so the story went that this young gentleman was caught in a fire as a youngster and had both feet burnt off in the fire and walked carefully. He had shoes on, but the shoes were um, a props. In reality, he was basically walking on his heels. And the student, when he said, "I have no toes," the whole class went completely silent because they knew who this was. And to be honest with you, for the next 5 minutes, my mind absolutely shut down because, again, I've never encountered students with no feet before. So I had to come up with something, and I don't remember what it was, but it was one of those instances where your brain just says, "Whoa, I'm done. I'm going to take a break. I'm going for coffee. See you later." Out the ear. Um, and so that was a shock. But over the years, if you watched Mr. Holland's Opus, there's a scene where he's teaching a deaf student with a football helmet, and he's banging on the helmet with a drumstick. It almost got to that, but I've taught students with all kinds of disabilities, and without fail, there's one who probably will be watching, and he created a scenario that will always be on my mind for the rest of my life. Gentleman who he's still with us today on Facebook, doing as well as he can, with, I believe, MS, and he was in a wheelchair. He could only move his feet. He could program computers, but he could only move his feet. And, he wanted to play piano. And I went, "Okay, let's take a challenge. Let's run with it." So we took one of the keyboards, and Mr. Finn, if you remember him from the wood shop and a bunch of other different places, wonderful, wonderful teacher, constructed for him a wooden rack that we would put the keyboard on, and he would use his toes to plunk out, and he learned how to read the music, and he plunked out tunes after tune after tune. Then we decided to kind of use both feet for the melody and whatever. And he did really, really well. In fact, he went right straight through book one of the class, of the Alfred's Adult Piano Method book, way before the rest of the class did. He was just soaking it right up and did a wonderful, wonderful job. And then he was into book two. And then we used to have something in those days in April or May at the theater across the street called the Communications Festival. And it was a 4 day thing, and it was run by the English department, but I would help out. The stage crew would help out. And there's a member of stage crew who climbed into the ceiling of that theater to fix a light bulb for no other reason than he was the only one on the planet that could, and he did. And it worked out fine, and he knows who I'm talking about. But anyway, this gentleman in the wheelchair came up to me and said that he wanted to be part of that festival. He wanted to play piano. And I thought, fabulous. Because the stage was accessible by wheelchair, it was just a ramped stage. And I said, what a great idea. So we inserted him in, and we put up the keyboard on the stage when his turn came. Anybody could do anything. There was a case of if you wanted to do poetry, you could do poetry. If you wanted to do singing, you could sing. If you wanted to pick your nose, you could pick your nose. But he wanted to play, and he wanted to be part of it. And I thought that was fantastic. So set up the keyboard for him. He wheels himself into position, and he plays two pieces. And what was really, really, and I tear up thinking about this because I don't think too many people really took this to heart. how special this school is and how special the students are and the staff. And not just me. A lot of other staff were involved in this. But to have a student permanently in a wheelchair who basically was disabled in so many different ways, yet had the foresight and the drive to perform in front of public. And he did so, and he did so well. And the audience responded by giving him a standing ovation for someone who could not stand. Okay. That's just a very, very important story. That's an experience I will never forget, and I haven't forgotten it. And I think this is the opportunity, the perfect vehicle to make that known to people. There's an awful lot of wonderful stories. We did a show at Sick Children's Hospital way back. And they don't do them anymore because at the one time the fear of bringing in a band and bringing in bugs from other people, and we had students in this room in beds in wheelchairs, and then it was telecast to the rest of the hospital. And there was one student there who had some kind of old age disease. And this was a lady who was a young girl who was probably no more than 10, 11 years old, but she looked about 70. You know what I'm talking about? Anyway, our drummer was a hip, cool dude at the time, and on the bus on the way back to school, he was kind of avoiding me, and I don't understand why. I said, "What's with him?" And they said, "Well, you know that girl in the wheelchair, the one that looked really old? Yeah. Well, she kind of went up to the drummer and said, 'Can I have your drumsticks?' And he gave them to her. And he was kind of afraid that you'd get angry at him for giving him those drumsticks." And I went, "Are you kidding? To be honest, between you and me, I don't even think she'll live out the year. She's got a terminal disease. He probably made her life." Okay, and that's the sort of story that I like telling, and that's the sort of thing that I'm the only one that remembers it. That gentleman might remember it, but he made some person's life with the way he acted and interacted, and this is the kind of student that inhabited the school and the neighborhood, and I could go on, and I will go on, and I've been running now for 21 minutes, and I haven't even begun. I've got so many stories and so many things. With regards to the history of the school and the history of some teachers, a lot of students might not realize that we had some supremely gifted teachers that just, they just looked at it and some old guy at the front of the room, not having a clue that this person at the front of the room had multiple PhDs, was an author, was an explorer, sailed the world. So I'll get into some of these stories down the road, and hopefully some people will be interested in them. So I came to school in 1983, and the first thing I was told by the principals, "We're doing West Side Story." And I went, "You're not." "Oh yeah, we've already picked the cast and the crew and the singers and all the important people." And I'm going, "Do you realize West Side Story is probably the hardest book? I've directed West Side Story, I've conducted West Side Story, I've played in West Side Story. It's one of the most incredibly difficult musical scores to sing. There's a very, very famous recording of the composer Leonard Bernstein, who was the conductor of the New York Philharmonic for many, many years. He wrote it, and he was conducting a version of West Side Story, and he had some of the best vocalists in the world on this recording. Whoops. And what he wanted, they couldn't even give him. They couldn't give him some of the best Tony Award-winning Broadway singers. They weren't giving him what he wanted. So here I am coming to Westwood that didn't have much of a band program. We didn't know what to expect, and I was told, "Yeah, we're doing West Side Story." No band in a high school, except maybe Chinguzi or School for the Arts, could pull off the score for West Side Story, much less a program with one band class and a guitar class and a beginning band class. So we hired a keyboard player and a drummer, and we did a West Side Story with the Sears Festival. But that's why I look the way I look. I'm pretty sure I would be a whole lot better looking and still have my hair if I hadn't had to spend 6 months doing that stupid play with Maria and all those people. It was still a good play. The choreography was amazing. The singing was amazing. The direction was pretty good, although I had a problem with the director. Go figure. Um, she picked out who she wanted, and some of the people she picked out could not sing. So that was a problem because West Side Story is mostly vocal. But we figured it out. We solved that problem. That was my first year at the school. And I thought, what did I get myself into? But I met, even today, some of the students that I met back in 1983, 84, I keep in touch with. And they're, in some cases, grandparents now. And they're wonderful people, and I'm honored to be part of this legacy and to be part of this community and to be part of the school and its students. That the students might change, but in reality they really don't. Their appearances change, their backgrounds change, their nationalities change, their cultures change, but in reality they really don't. The students are still the students. And I've always prided myself on being not a bad communicator. Um, and so maybe I've been a little successful in some ways. I hope I have. I don't see myself as the great mover, shaker, motivator, and I never have. It's the students that motivated me. The students have inspired me. The students have educated me. That's the key thing. And that's probably the most important thing that I was able to take out of all those years of teaching. I taught for 37 years, 31 in Westwood, in Malton. And my roots in Malton, I think now, even 7 years later, if I take a walk around the neighborhood, I still might find remnants of students floating around Westwood Mall or whatever it's called now. Um, and it's been the teaching aspect of it has always been wonderful. There wasn't a day, I can honestly say this with conviction, there wasn't a day in 31 years at that school that I didn't get up in the morning and I couldn't wait to get to school. Simple as that. That was just me. And the reason was because of the students. The students were exceptional. They were just in their own way, they were educational for me. Anyway, I think I've run down. What time is it? 27 minutes? I've been talking for 27 minutes? Have I ever talked for 27 minutes? I'm not used to talking for 27 minutes. Sure I am. Who am I kidding? Um, but I'm hoping you're enjoying this. I had a few people. I haven't looked at the comments from yesterday yet. I will. If you have comments or questions, I don't know how many there are. Maybe there's 2 or 3 comments. And maybe there's 5 or 6 viewers. I have no idea. But I am going to do this on a regular basis because there are stories and is history to Westwood and Malton and Lincoln Alexander that need to be set down on record. And this is one way of me doing that. It's setting down a chronological education, if it were, as it were, for people. For example, the whole concept of well, I'll get into this maybe another time. The infamous Malton Plan. For some of you might remember that. Why, at one point, Westwood only went to grade 12, while Morningstar Secondary went to grade 13. That's an issue that has bothered me for years. It created the false image for Westwood that has transpired probably to this day, and it was artificial, and it was artificially created by the board. And we'll get into that. I'll get into that another time. Um, anyway, I hope you're enjoying this. If you, you know, like, put comments down below, or personal message me or whatever you want to do. And hopefully I'll keep doing this. Now, this is a brand new setup. I don't know if you've noticed. The quality is slightly different. It's a different webcam, same microphone, but it's a really really old Acer Verizon desktop computer that I'm using that literally has the mice on the inside with the wheels turning things around to keep the things going. So the quality might not be as good, or maybe it's better. I don't know. But I am at some point going to get a real webcam, maybe even better technology. We'll see. But it's not so much a technology. Um, it's what I'm able to tell you. So I could be doing this on an old. Um, I think if you take a look right here behind me is a Kodak Brownie from the 40s and 50s. Okay, I could probably do it on there, and you'd probably enjoy it as well. Um, Comments about this, questions, uh, topics, by all means, fill in the gaps, and hopefully I'll be back. Maybe not tomorrow, but maybe the next day. If there's enough interest, I'll keep going, and maybe I'll just keep going simply because there's so much to tell, and nobody has this knowledge and is volunteering it for posterity, except for me. And I realize what I've got going here, and you guys are going to be the beneficiaries of this. So a little community, hopefully we build. If I get more than 10 viewers, I'm happy. Take care. We'll see you later. Bye.